Okay, well, let's talk about another political-related story here. Saudi Arabian stocks recovering today after falling as much as 7% to start the week. The bounce coming as news emerges that the kingdom may release a statement. Journalist Jamal Khashoggi was killed as a result of a botched interrogation. Joining us now is Isam Kasabi, financial analyst over at Minicorp Finance. Isam, thank you for joining us all the way from Dubai. We are very happy to have you. What is the Saudi stock market telling us about this story?
Well, yes, last week and the beginning of this week have been tough for the Saudi market. But yesterday and today we saw quite the recovery. It seems that the solidarity that the GCC states are in is boosting Saudi Arabia's stock market once more, and especially the statements given by President Trump earlier today.
So what statements, specifically, what do those statements do in terms of how traders are feeling about the health of the Saudi Arabian stock market? Give us an idea of why the volatility.
Well, basically right now we're seeing that the statements of sanctions being taken back by the U.S., by President Trump. And if the Saudi government presses that statement and boosts it, that will definitely recover that loss of it that we saw the past week and the first day of trading this week.
Isam, wondering probably, what are most of the stocks that trade over in Saudi Arabia? How liquid are they? Can you give us a sense of, what sort of industries these cover? Some people might think maybe it is mostly oil, but would love to get your opinion on that. And then, also weighing in on how easily it is to freely move in and out of these names.
Of course, petrochemical stocks are quite significant in Saudi Arabia. They're very important to the index. But we also have the banking sector and the insurance. We've also seen consumer staples as well move quite quickly in the past year. These are definitely part of the reforms that Saudi Arabia is taking upon themselves. Definitely, it's been a challenging year. Economically, globally speaking, we've seen interest rates rise, and that has affected economies all around the world, global trade concerns, and some political instability in the region.
Isam, the narrative out of Saudi Arabia the last few years has really been focused, at least business-wise, around this Vision 2030, the idea of reducing Saudi Arabia's dependence on oil and transforming it into a knowledge-based economy. Part of that has, of course, included billions of dollars of investment outside of the country in tech companies, including some huge American tech companies and startups as well, but also trying to attract foreign capital to Saudi Arabia. How is Saudi Arabia doing in achieving that Vision 2030?
I believe they're doing very well. If we look at the trade numbers between GCC and the EU zone, they're one of the largest trading partners, Saudi and the GCC alike. And we also see Saudi as a big player when it comes to US imports, Chinese imports as well. So Saudi is a very important economic player around the globe. Well, we also have seen, yes.
Yeah, and I'm just curious how the... at this point, I think we can fairly call it the disappearance and potential murder of Jamal Khashoggi. How does that derail Saudi Arabia's plans and, of course, their image as this country that is trying to transform and move away from the image of being a repressive and oppressive regime?
There are, of course, several mishaps that take place in any government around the world. At the moment, I decline to comment on the matters as it's a very sensitive topic. However, we've seen the recovery in the Saudi stock market, and that says nothing but good.
Isam, a lot of questions about what's going to happen with oil here. We've seen the stock price of oil rise, but it hasn't necessarily blown through the roof by any means. Is there a concern, and do you think it is a real concern that Saudi Arabia, one of the biggest, if not the biggest oil producer and exporter in the world, could use oil as a weapon if the U.S. and other countries do decide to come down on it with something like sanctions?
No, they would not. Honestly, we've seen nothing but cooperation on the end of OPEC, led by Saudi Arabia in terms of oil prices. The recovery of oil prices has been led by OPEC's efforts, and that has been led by Saudi Arabia. And we can't forget that the statements of the Ministry of Energy, Khalid Al-Falih of Saudi Arabia, has come forth and given a statement on Saudi Arabia's cooperation in also reducing the price of oil at the moment, as it has crossed $80 a barrel.
Yeah, Isam, I'm also curious about, in terms of between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia and the oil relationship that exists there, given over the last few years that America has decreased its dependence on foreign oil as it's increased fracking here in the U.S. and increased the development of oil extraction here in the U.S. Does Saudi Arabia still yield the power that it used to over the U.S. because of due to oil?
Yes, it definitely has. Saudi Arabian oil is still much cheaper to produce, and that will always be a factor with the imports and exports.
Isam, in terms of what you're watching and how this might play out, I mean, presumably we'll get the statement here from the Saudi government at some time within the next 24 hours, and then what happens from there as someone who's been following the Saudi stock market for a long time?
I believe the stock market will recover quite strongly. I believe investors are looking at the technical charts. This rapid recovery in the past 2 days is quite promising, and I believe it's going to go well from here.
Isam Kasabi, financial analyst at Menacorp Finance. Thanks so much for joining us on Cheddar today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All the way from Dubai. We appreciate that.